There is a room in every palace that no one else is allowed to enter. Not the throne room, not the hall of judgment. A smaller room where the king sits alone at the end of the day and looks at his own life the way he would never look at a stranger's. The stone is cold there. No servants, no incense, only the sound of his own breath and the weight of a crown he has, by now, stopped noticing on his head, the way you stop noticing a ring after enough years, until the night it catches the light wrong and reminds you it was always there. He has spent the morning untangling other people's knots, a dispute over land, a quarrel between brothers, a woman weeping, holding a child, asking him to decide who the mother truly is. He listens. He waits. He sees the shape of the truth before anyone else does, the way you see a shoreline before you see the water breaking against it. He speaks, and the room goes still, and the answer feels less like a decision and more like something that was always there, waiting to be noticed. That is the day. That is the myth we remember. But there is another room. In that smaller room, the same man, the wisest man, they say, who ever lived, sits with his own marriage falling into pieces he cannot name. He has 1,000 judgments behind him, and none of them will fit his own hands. He knows what he would tell another king in his position. He knows exactly, and still, he cannot do it for himself. This is not a story about a king. Not really. It is a story about a shape, a pattern that repeats itself in every human life that has ever tried to be honest with itself. We call it, now, the Solomon Paradox. The wisdom that flows so easily towards someone else's suffering and dries up completely, like a river hitting stone, the moment it turns back toward our own. Why can we see so clearly through another person's fog and stand blind in our own? Why does the same mind that unravels a friend heartbreak in one conversation spend years circling its own never landing? Sit with that question for a moment. Don't answer it yet. Just feel the shape of it in your chest, the way you might feel the weight of a stone before you decide whether to lift it. This is not a lesson about kings or ancient scrolls or secrets kept from ordinary people. Nothing here is being revealed to you that was hidden on purpose. It is simply old. It is simply human. And it has been sitting inside us quietly for longer than any of the books that tried to explain it. We are going to walk through this slowly, from the old symbol, the myth of the wise judge, inward, toward the private room where you already know this feeling, toward the version of it that lives in your own chest, right now, unresolved. Let the story hold you for a while. It doesn't need to be believed. It only needs to be felt. Oh, the image is old. 2 women, 1 child, a sword raised, not to cut, but to reveal. The king says, divide the living child in half and give each woman a piece. And the true mother, the one whose love has no need to win, cries out, give the child to her. Only let him live. Think of the room where this happened. Stone floor, cold under bare feet. 2 women trembling, for very different reasons. A child too young to understand why grown women are shouting over his small body. And a king, watching not with cruelty, but with a strange kind of stillness, waiting to see which woman's fear would break first and in which direction. That is the myth on its surface. A judge so wise he could see straight through deception into the marrow of the human heart. But notice something. He was not the mother. He had no fear trembling in him, no nights of feeding and rocking, no memory of that child's first breath. His wisdom was possible precisely because nothing in him was at stake. He stood outside the fire, and so he could see its shape clearly. This is the outer symbol, and it is simple. Distance makes vision possible. A stranger's grief is a landscape we can walk through with open eyes. Our own grief is a room with the lights off, and we are the ones bumping into the furniture. Every culture has some version of this figure. The wise elder who counsels the village but cannot save his own son. The oracle who reads the future of empires and never sees the betrayal standing beside her. The judge, the sage, the healer, always brilliant at a distance, always a little lost when the mirror turns toward them. The physician who diagnoses a stranger's illness in a glance and ignores the pain in his own chest for a year. The counselor who mends 100 marriages and quietly loses her own. The father who gives his children flawless guidance about love, while his own has gone silent at the dinner table for months. Always the same shape, clarity flowing outward, fog gathering at home. We are not meant to read this as an accusation. It is closer to a law of physics for the heart. The eye that watches cannot easily watch itself. And so we built, without meaning to, a species of split creatures, clear-sighted for others, clouded for ourselves. Let the myth rest here a moment, before it walks any further inward. Oh? Move now from the myth into the ordinary week of an ordinary person. You already have proof of this pattern. You lived it, probably, before this week ends. A friend calls you, undone by a relationship that is clearly, plainly, unmistakably wrong for them. You see it in one sentence. You want to reach through the phone and shake them gently awake. Leave, you think. Just leave. It is so obvious from where you stand. You feel it in your body, even a kind of certainty that sits in the chest, steady, warm, unhurried. There is no static in your reasoning. No fear pulling at the edges. Just a clean, clear line from the facts to the answer, and you walk that line without stumbling once. And then you hang up, and you go back to your own life, where the same shape of wrongness has been sitting for months, maybe years, and you cannot see it at all. Not because you are less intelligent than you were on the phone. Not because you love yourself less than you love your friend. Because you are inside it. Inside a thing, the edges disappear. You cannot see the shape of a room you are standing inside of, only the walls closest to your hands. From within a life, there is no outline, only texture, only the next hour, only the small negotiations that keep a person moving forward without ever stepping back far enough to see the whole shape of where they are moving to. Psychologists have a name for this now, a modern name for an old ache. They call it Solomon's paradox, borrowing the king's story to describe something they measured carefully in ordinary people. Give someone a stranger's dilemma, and their reasoning becomes wide, balanced, considerate of many angles. Give that same person their own dilemma, wearing their own name, and the reasoning narrows. It becomes defensive. It starts protecting something instead of seeing something. This is not weakness. This is architecture. The architecture of a self that must survive its own story, and so cannot always afford to see that story with total clarity. Think of it this way. When you advise your friend, you have nothing to lose in the advice itself. Your identity is not built from her marriage. Your fear is not attached to his career. You can afford truth because truth costs you nothing. But your own life is not a case study. It is the roof over your head, the years already spent, the version of yourself you have been telling people you are. To see your own situation as clearly as you see your friends, sometimes admitting that years were spent building on sand, and some part of the mind will do almost anything to avoid that particular kind of falling. There is a kind of arithmetic the mind performs, quietly, beneath conscious thought. It weighs the discomfort of seeing clearly against the discomfort of staying blurred. And often, without asking permission, it chooses the blur, not out of weakness, but out of something closer to self-preservation. The fog protects a structure that took years to build. Pulling it back means admitting the structure may have been unstable from the start. So the fog is not stupidity. The fog is protection. A strange, misguided kindness the self performs for itself, even when it costs the self everything. Consider how differently the body responds. Advising a friend, the shoulders stay loose, the breath stays even, the voice comes easily. Facing your own equivalent question, something tightens, a held breath, a stomach that clenches slightly before the mind is even named what it's afraid of. The body often knows the fog is there before the mind admits it. Oh? Now come closer still. Let the myth and the theory fall away for a moment, and let this be about you specifically, the actual shape of your own private paradox. Think of one decision you have been circling. Not solving. Circling. The relationship you already know the ending of. The job you describe to friends in a tone that gives away more than your words do. The habit, the pattern, the person, the choice you keep almost making. If a friend brought you this exact situation, word for word, what would you tell them? Say it in your mind right now, the sentence you would use. Notice how clean it is, how fast it arrived, how little hesitation lived inside it. Now notice the gap, the strange, aching distance between that sentence and your own life, where the same truth sits, recognized and somehow still unlived. This is the private room. This is where the king actually lived, most nights, long after the crowds had gone home, believing he possessed some rare and total wisdom. He did not lack the answer. He lacked the distance required to use it on himself. Maybe you know this feeling as a specific hour. Lying awake at 2 in the morning, the ceiling doing nothing to help, the answer sitting somewhere just behind your ribs, close enough to touch and somehow still unreachable. You have said the sentence to yourself before. You have felt its truth land, briefly, and then watched it slide away again under the weight of tomorrow's obligations. You are not broken for feeling this. You are only human, standing exactly where every wise judge, every oracle, every quietly suffering sage has stood before you. Close enough to your own heart that its heat blurs the outline of things. The paradox is not a flaw in you. It is a fact about closeness itself. Love distorts the very eyes it lives behind. The nearer a thing sits to your chest, the harder it becomes to see its true size, its true shape, the true distance still left to travel. Oh? There is no cure for this, not really. But there are practices. Small acts of distance, borrowed from the very mechanism that already works so well when the trouble belongs to someone else. The first is the empty chair. Sit out in a quiet room and place an empty chair across from you. Speak your situation out loud, but speak it as though the person sitting in that chair is a stranger you have just met, someone whose face you don't know, whose history means nothing to you yet. Say the facts plainly. Let the coldness of description do what warmth cannot. Notice how the sentences change shape when there is no one to protect. The excuses thin out. The story loses its softening edges, and something closer to the bare what underneath begins to show through. The second is the letter not sent. Write to yourself the way you would write to a friend in trouble. Dear friend, here is what I see happening in your life. Use your own name as if it belonged to someone else. Seal it. Do not read it again for 3 days. The third is the distance breath. When a decision feels tangled, stand up, walk to another room, and simply breathe there for 1 full minute before returning to the question. Distance is not only mental. The body can manufacture a little of it simply by moving through space. The fourth is the naming practice. Describe your situation out loud without using the word I. Replace it with your own name, spoken in the third person. Sarah has been staying in this job for 2 years, past the point of feeling anything. Something shifts when the pronoun changes. The ego loosens its grip, just slightly, on the story. The fifth is the 3-day rule. For any decision that frightens you, refuse to decide within the first day it arrives. Let it sit. Not to avoid it, but to let the fog thin the way morning fog thins by afternoon. The sixth is the mirror question, and it may be the oldest of these practices, in one form or another. Simply ask, what would I tell someone I love if they showed me exactly this? Then sit in the silence that follows the answer, because the silence is often where the real work happens. The seventh is simple sitting. No question, no writing, no chair across from you. Only stillness. Enough of it that the noise of self-interest, which is often loud without announcing itself as noise, has room to quiet down and reveal what was underdog it the whole time. There is an eighth practice, quieter than the rest, that some find harder than all the others, the practice of asking someone else. Not for the answer, but for the description. Tell me what you see, plainly, as if I were a stranger to you. Most of us resist this, because it removes the fog we have been standing inside so carefully. But a trusted voice speaking without our defenses attached to it can sometimes do in one sentence what months of private circling cannot. And a ninth, smaller still. The practice of writing the situation down as a story that happened to someone else years ago in another country. Give the version of yourself a different name. Let a little time pass in the telling. Sometimes the shift of tense alone, from is happening to once happened, is enough to loosen the grip closeness has on clear sight. None of these practices are secrets. None of them were withheld from you until now. They are only reminders, small doors back into the kind of seeing you already do for everyone else. Apply gently to yourself. Oh, picture the king once more, at the very end of his life, in that same small room. Older now, fewer crowds outside the door. He is not wiser about himself than he was at the beginning. That is, perhaps, the most honest part of the story. Wisdom about others does not accumulate into wisdom about the self simply through years, or crowns, or fame. But maybe that was never the point of the story. Maybe the myth was never meant to teach us how to finally solve ourselves. Maybe it was only ever meant to keep us company in the not-solving. To say, even the wisest man who ever sat on a throne felt this exact fog you are feeling tonight. Even he had a private room. Even he sat in it, some evenings, unable to reach the clarity he gave away so freely to strangers. This is not a fact of history. It is not a prophecy, and it makes no claim about what is destined for you. It is only a way of looking, an old mirror held up at a certain angle that some people have found useful when their own reflection grew too clouded to read. Nothing here asks you to believe in kings, or thrones, or ancient courts, only to notice, gently, the shape this story traces, a shape that seems to appear again and again, wherever a mind tries to turn its own clear sight back upon its own heart. You may put it down now. You may pick it back up on a harder night. Either way, the fog will lift some days and thicken again on others, the way weather does, the way it always has for every mind that has ever tried to see itself clearly from the inside. That is not a failure. That may simply be what it means to be the one living the story, instead of the one standing outside it, close enough to feel its weight, too close, sometimes to see its shape. Oh? So tonight, when you find yourself in your own private room, holding an answer you cannot seem to use, do not curse the fog. It is not your weakness. It is only your humanity. Perhaps the ultimate wisdom is not in fixing your life perfectly, but in having the courage to look at your own broken pieces with the same gentle kindness you have always given to the rest of the world. Oh? Thank you for walking through the dark with me tonight. Until next time, stay close to the truth.